Hi there, art historians. I wanted to check in with you about the second field report. The second field report is set up the same way as the third field report, which we'll be doing later. And the structure is actually the same as the first field report. So the idea is that that first field report is essentially your simpler version of the second field report. So in the first field report, you wrote about one artwork and you told us about the style. You identified style characteristics, you identified physical properties, you identified visual structure for that one artwork. And the idea was that that was telling us a little bit about the style. For second field report, you're going to be talking about one style again, and in paragraph 1, you're going to identify the style, and you're going to tell us 3 visual structure characteristics. But then you're going to go on to describe in the next paragraphs how that relates to the style and these artworks as examples. So you're going to tell us about the physical properties of your style, and your examples are those 5 artworks. And so you can tell us what is most important. What do we always see as far as physical properties in this style? For example, we always see huge artworks made out of sidewalk chalk. And the style, they always have those characteristics. For example, this first artwork titled Sidewalk Chalk Portrait, I guess, is really big, and somebody made it with sidewalk chalk. Okay, so that's how you use an artwork as an example of the style. That means you might not describe every physical property characteristic of every artwork. You're just going to use them as supporting evidence. So your argument is these are all really big. What we want to see then is that your 5 artwork examples are all really big. When you get into visual structure, you're going to find that some of them have different visual structures, but what you're looking for is what they have in common. So when you look at that set of artworks, you're going to say, okay, these all have they all have asymmetry, right? But the color schemes are very different. Or they all follow a similar color scheme, but some of them are symmetrical, some of them are asymmetrical. We always see rhythm and we always see directional lines that are designed to help us move through the artwork. Or this artist always avoids showing a realistic illusion of depth. They avoid, horizontal positioning and linear perspective. Okay, so that's the sort of thing we're looking for. In this assignment, you'll see that I'm replacing the video that's down here in a moment. You'll see that we've identified the time period. You're going to be identifying that style, and 5 artworks that are similar. I recommend that you choose 5 artworks that are similar in form. And then you're identifying the important style characteristics. So remember that style characteristics, what we're talking about there is how would you recognize this style? So if you tell me we always see people as the subjects, right? That's not the most helpful because most of the styles for most of human history have people as subjects, right? And so what you could say is we usually see working class people, or we usually see subjects from mythology, right? That's a better style characteristic. A lot of what we've looked at in this class, at least the first half of this class, is oil painting. And so telling us it's oil painting probably doesn't do a lot, but you might be able to tell us how they painted. They were very careful, they used oils and they mixed them, and the transparent layering of oils helped us see a really convincing, realistic illusion of depth. Or they used thick paint and they painted really fast and expressively, and the paint left kind of a thick texture to the surface of the painting, and those are the processes, right? Those are the materials. Of course, you might also be talking about architecture. Later in the class, you might also be talking about sculpture. So if you chose a bunch of sculptures, you might be telling us, these are all made out of these various materials. All right, so you can see the assignment specifications here, but the one I always like to direct you to is the organization. So notice that you've got the same paragraph order as in written field report 1. So the idea is that you're able to work with it the same sort of way. So first paragraph, you're going to identify the style. You're going to identify at least 3 characteristics, something that is particular to this style, and and not something that just applies to a lot of styles. Physical properties, you're going to tell us what we see in all of these. For this section, if you got through, you've talked about form, you've talked about size, you've talked about medium. Oftentimes I want you to tell me about how it's painted or how it's made, right? Something about the process being used. But you might also just think of what makes this special, right? What helps us identify the style characteristics? What is a characteristic that helps us identify the style? So if these are really big or really small, if these are portable, if these are made with a particular form, those sorts of things. Please do not just list all of the sizes. That makes for really boring reading, and it doesn't show me that you understand what they have in common as far as size. Visual structure, you're looking for things they have in common. You can skip, you don't even need to tell me about where they're different. What we're looking for is what they have in common. Please don't just describe one artwork and then describe another. I want you to make the connection between the various artworks and what they have in common. You might consider taking some, writing down on a piece of paper or making kind of a mind map, looking for, okay, does this apply to this one? How about that one? How about that one? Work your way through that list of visual structure terms. Don't forget formal elements and composition. I'm going to be looking for both of those. The fourth paragraph, subject, you've got to tell me about. Iconography, you definitely need to tell me about it. Conventions, you should probably tell me about that. Conventional symbolism, you might not have any. So if you don't have symbolism, skip it. Not all styles do. Don't make it up if it doesn't already exist. Here is a great time to use some sources if you're not sure who your subjects are, if they are specific people. But don't forget how much you already know. You know that this particular artwork is a woman because you can see these features of her body. You know that this time of year is summer because of the kinds of plants, leaves, trees, weather, etc., that you see. So don't overlook that stuff, which is subject and iconography. And then conventions is another one that people tend to have trouble with at the start of the quarter, which is reasonable. So conventions are the rules, the set of standards that these artists use to depict their artworks. So, I'm sorry, their subjects. So think about Romanticism, where we had very strict rules about how realistic depth and space was depicted, but we were allowed to make changes to what really happened. Versus realism, where we had pretty realistic conventions for depicting people, but also for depicting the space they were in. Think about expressionism, where our rules for depicting people seem to be breaking down, right? Or they are different, actually. If you had an expressionist artist and they were using conventions for depicting people that were pulled from realism or Romanticism, it wouldn't be expressionism anymore. So what is it about the standard ways of showing a person that are done in your particular style? And then cultural context. Remember, this isn't subject. What's going on at the time? What influenced the making of this art? Who or what were these folks interested in? Were there new ideas? What's happening right now that's causing this style to happen? Not what happened before, but what's happening not now in 2020, right? But right now, back then, that has changed so that this style can become important. Now remember, as we get into the modern period, styles overlap. So you might have a situation where Joe and Susie over here are painting in this particular style, and Fred and George over here are painting in another style. Same time, same place. What's different about who Fred and George hang out with versus who Susie and Joe, or whoever I said before, hang out with? What are the ideas that these guys have and their intent and who they're hanging out with and who they're interested in and what ideas they're interested in versus these others? All right. This is another good place to use source information, right? I am asking for a works cited page with source information. I want your source information to help you say what you need to say. Remember, 4 sources of information here, 4 main sources of information. What you see in the artwork, what you see by reading the caption. You know how this was made and when it was made and stuff like that. What you know from class. Show me what you know from class, right? That's the goal of this assignment, is I want to know what you have understood about art history in this particular style from our class. And then the fourth one is source information, other source information. So what research have you done to fill in the gaps, the pieces you didn't know about these particular artworks or these particular artists? For the last two paragraphs, for subject and cultural context, you are welcome to use source information that tells us this particular artwork is so-and-so, such and such thing. It was made for this person. The subject was this person. And so what you may end up saying is all of these have this in common. Here's an example. Use a source. This is the example. And let me give you an example so I'm not just being vague. Let's say you're going to tell me all of the subjects are queens and kings. They're all royalty, okay? And then you say that broadly, and you might tell us iconography. You know, we can tell they're all kings and queens because they all have crowns on their head. And then you use source information to say, this particular one is Queen Susie Q of Prussia or wherever. And that's your source information and evidence from a source supporting what you are already saying. So notice there I made an assertion that they're all kings and queens, and I supported that with evidence from within the artwork, the crowns, and from without the artwork, from source information that I read about, okay, and cited. So that is the assignment. It should be somewhat familiar to you. If you are doing something vastly different than this 5-paragraph order, you aren't quite doing the assignment. You've misunderstood something. If you find that your paragraphs are just massively long, you can break them up. So I say second paragraphs, right? So if the first paragraph should be just one, but if your second paragraph, if there's lots you have to say, you're welcome to use multiple paragraphs there. All right. As always, I love answering questions about field reports, so let me have them. Tell me what you need, and good luck.